Good evening, I'm Vikram. Tonight on The Big Question, we're asking here on NDTV Profit about these big deals in the entertainment sector. We're talking about Dharma and Bhansali and XL, all of them laying out the red carpet, as it were, for corporates. So are legacy Bollywood studios going corporate is the question we're asking, because something fundamental is changing in Bollywood, and it's not just about box office hits or star power anymore. It's actually about stakes and structure and scale. And yes, there is serious money that we're talking about. So let's look at the deals that we are considering for this discussion. In October 2024, Karan Johar has sold half his stake in Dharma Productions. 50% of Dharma Productions has gone to Adar Poonawalla. And this is a 1,000 crore rupee transaction. It values one of Bollywood's most influential studios at 2,000 crore rupees. Not a distressed sale, at least that's what Karan Johar says, but it's a bid for growth, for global platforms, for big budget franchises and multilingual scale. Then what happened? Besides the Dharma Productions deal in December 2025, Saregama stepped into Sanjay Leela Bhansali's world, and they've committed 325 crore rupees. They're locking in exclusive music rights for this, for all future Bhansali films. A roadmap to potentially take majority control by the year 2030 has been laid out. So it's a clear bet over here that Saregama is making on IP. Not just individual films, but there is IP, and we're talking exclusively about music a lot when you talk about these deals. And we'll come to that. Now, in the very first month of 2026, in January, the big news. Universal Music Group is picking up 30% of XL Entertainment. The consideration over here is 800 crore rupees. It links Farhan Akhtar and Ritesh Sidhwani's creative engine, which is XL Entertainment, now to one of the world's biggest music companies, and that is Universal. So this deal spans films and digital and publishing, and yes, again, music, dedicated new music label as well when it comes to this deal between XL and Universal. So three iconic names, three very different deals. One common thread though, which is corporate capital moving decisively into Bollywood's living room. So why is this happening now is the question. Is it because the business of Bollywood itself has changed? There are fewer theatrical releases. There is uneven box office outcome. The rising production budgets, and we know about the star power and the kind of budgets that those require. And also the costly short-term borrowing that has gone up, and which is why perhaps we're seeing this phenomenon. Is it because OTT platforms have altered our viewing habits? Regional cinema continuing to punch above its weight. And there is, this is all about forcing Hindi studios to rethink scale and risk and reach as well. And of course, the contradiction, which is worth looking into, if the box office is bouncing back, going by the way that films like Dhurandhar and Sayyara and Chhava and Kantara, all of these films, how they've done, then why the rush for corporate capital? Now, that's a legit question as well. So is volatility rather than volume now the real problem? And is that what's making informal financing uncomfortable? So when Karan Johar says, I will always be artistic, but it is important to be commercial, is that just personal honesty or a broader signal that profitability has become a prerequisite to do business? It's not a choice for Bollywood's future. And zooming out even further, now the question is also whether Bollywood is simply following a global playbook where legacy studios are being absorbed by platforms. Yes, very specific reference to the Netflix bid for Warner Discovery. It's quite clear that IP has become king and data is driving decisions, and entertainment is no longer run on handshakes, but now will it be run by boardrooms and balance sheets is the question. And that's what this debate is about. Joining us to take these on, let me introduce you to our panel tonight. Shibashish Sarkar is joining us. He's president of the Producers Guild of India. Along with him, we have Karan Taurani joining us as well. He's EVP at Elara Capital. Great to have you both, gentlemen. And a bit, we'll have more members in our panel. But Karan, I want to begin by asking you, why are we seeing so much corporate involvement in Bollywood now? Is it because there is financial distress, or there is this aspiration for global growth?
Hi, Vikram. I think film business is just like any other business. End of the day, it's about profitability. It's about making money and ROI. Over the last 2 to 3 years, we have seen many films struggle because in terms of cinema and box office, these films haven't done well or scaled up. So I think one very big reason is that films have to make money, have to make ROI, and they made hefty losses. So this actually gives them access to a lot of deep pockets in terms of corporate capital. What is happening also from a customer standpoint in the post-COVID era, you are seeing a change in preference. Consumers are not going to watch small, medium budget film content on cinemas. They are only watching large scale content. Now, this large scale content is made at a hefty cost. It involves big amount of budgets, which maybe the small production houses cannot raise that kind of capital. So to kind of diversify the risk, it's very important for them to go to the corporate way and actually tie up with larger, companies, MNCs, or larger corporate conglomerates to actually have the deep pocket situation here. That's the first thing. Second thing is that films are going on OTT platforms. Earlier, back in the day, the share of revenues for a particular film was extremely high from cinemas when the film would do very well on box office. But nowadays, you are getting a higher share from OTT platforms in case the film doesn't do well in cinemas. So the dependence on OTT platforms has kind of increased for these films, and that is not working in their favor. So there are certain films which go directly on OTT platforms, but there's a certain cap in terms of monetization what these films will make. In terms of cinema, there's no cap on monetization because OTT platforms won't pay beyond a certain point in terms of premiums or digital rights. A third very important trend to note here is that there's a scarcity of music content. So many of the music labels are not able to bid for films because the number of films releasing has actually come down. And within that, the successful films have also come down. So when music labels go and bid for acquiring music rights of these particular films, they have to pay a hefty premium. So to balance that factor out, it makes more sense for music labels also to kind of come into this business. And last but not the least, we are talking about scale, distribution at a very large scale. Hindi box office, as you clearly see, it is dominated only by the Indian markets. Our global share is less than 10%. So these kind of partnerships will enhance the scale of the films and will also enhance distribution models globally and also scale up the global Indian box office revenue as a whole.
So that is the aspiration, and you've laid out the factors. Prahlad Kakkar is also joining us, ad man, and of course someone who's tracked the media world so closely. When you consider the way the legacy production houses have moved over the years, and yes, it has been concentrated, Prahlad, to a large extent on star power. That model seems to be crumbling or not delivering the way it used to. Is that the primary reason why we are moving towards corporatization? Because now we need to not spend so much on our stars and ensuring that there are 20 vanity vans serving them and all of the costs involved over there. Is that the primary reason, you think? Because there is a shift that is palpable right now with 3 big deals getting cracked.
No, I don't think so. I think it's basically because there's a lot of threats. The Hindi movie industry as such, regardless of the fact that there are a couple of films that make hits, the fact is that 70% of all films made are flopped. And that 25% of those films only recover their money. 5% of the films made are actually hits. So when you look at ROI and look at it as a business model, it becomes very difficult for a private label to sustain that kind of activity without understanding that it's all about content and not about stars. And because they're doing that and because they can't afford it, they are now looking at diluting their equity to corporates who are dying to get into the business of the romance of entertainment because they think that it's lucrative, it's interesting, it looks so much more interesting from outside than it actually is. So once they come in, like they did in the past, a lot of corporates came into the thing, had their hands bitten and went off and immediately left the playing field. This is a similar thing. The point is that creative control, who is going to have that? Everything depends on who has creative control. Now look at Adi Chopra, for instance. He has complete creative control of everything that his company makes. And his company is one of the few that has actually kept its head above water. Because the guy who understands the business is in creative control.
Correct.
As far as the distribution and everything is concerned, those are logistics.
Correct.
And they make money, and efficiencies of corporate factors will actually make them better and more efficient.
So why were the others not being able to do that? It's a logical question. If YRF was able to crack that code and become a corporate studio of sorts, then why were the others not able to reach that?
Because they didn't have complete creative control over everything. they were selective about creative control. And they probably didn't have the kind of instinct that Adi has over how markets are changing and what the market demands.
Right. So that instinct does corporate India now bring to the table? Shivashi Sarkar, how is it fundamentally likely to change? Is that going to happen? Because instinct is something that is fundamental to people who've been part of the industry. And we're talking about certain stars as well. So, and they've led production houses, and Amir Khan Productions, even a Salman Khan Films and Ashutosh Gowarikar. All of these are filmmakers who've led production houses. Now, how does this shift happen? If these are the ones with the instinct, what does India Inc. really bring to the table that is going to change that entire game?
So, first thing first, that my point of view is that this is not happening for the first time here. If we just trace back few decades, we have seen corporatization, and the corporatization is probably, I think here we are more talking in terms of bringing in institutional capital into the industry. And the corporatization, the culture and system and process can be a different part of discussion altogether, right? So I'm not mixing up the both. We have seen in the early 2000 and subsequent next few years, companies like UTV, companies which became got listed, then Disney picked up. We have seen Raghav Bell starting film businesses, which finally went pivoted into Viacom, and now the part of Geo Studios. We have seen Geo Studios as a large organization which has invested there. They have multiple levels. Of course, there's a Geo Studio as a level. They have invested in Dinesh Vijan, in Maddox. We have seen investment in Balaji in the last few decades. Of course, last 1.5 years, 3 very interesting deals which happened. And I think this is all for good at the end of the day. I completely agree with Prahlad that this industry or this business, unlike many other business, needs a balance of creative and commerce. You can't run it like only a creative-driven organizations without necessarily a focus on where the commercial end is ending up with. At the same point of time, it is not a transaction. It is not like another FMCG or white goods or another manufacturing business where you can deal with completely like a transaction-based focus. So that balance is very important, and it is not easy to have that balance because everybody probably strives to have that balance.
Yes.
I feel that the examples what you gave, like Virus is a great example. I mean, there will be very few organizations like that across the country.
Yes.
Who have been able to maintain that balance. But bringing in institutional capital, bringing in fresh money, which is all for good because the business will be scalable. The box office definitely has been doing better. India's box office in compared to the global box office, if it takes the many other countries, like even in compared to US or many other countries, our footfall is in a much better position in compared to pre-COVID to now.
Right.
So I think these are the great signs.
So you think they are great times, but here we are seeing, Karan, and you pointed out music, but whether it's music or talent management or distribution, now these are the important legs on which some of these deals are getting cracked. And music especially, you're not looking at it film by film, but it is actually music as a whole. If you consider this deal as well with music rights, the Bhansali Saregama deal, it's a particularly music deal. It's not a film deal. Saregama is buying music IP over here, which is monetizable across streaming reels and live performances and catalog licensing as well. So it is a deal. Even the Excel Universal deal is building a dedicated Excel Music label. So there is this specificity to how you're approaching films, and you kind of breaking it up over here when it comes to distribution and talent management and very importantly music, like you pointed out.
So I think there's a very big strategic shift. Every production house today has got its own music label. So take the example of Yash Raj Film, take the example of Z Studios, which has got its own music label, even Sony for that matter. Or there are music labels in the likes of P Series and Tips Music, which have got their own production houses. So I think there's strategic importance here where production houses and music are somewhere coded and linked to each other. And the point I made earlier is that there's a scarcity of the number of films being produced here. And within that, there's a scarcity in terms of the films doing well, or large-scale films rather. So because of which the other music labels, which don't have any alignment to a production house, are finding it tough to buy this kind of content, or they are paying a very hefty premium. So this will kind of rationalize the prices as far as music content acquisition is concerned. And as we all know, music is a very big strategic factor which drives success of any film, right? So in the case of films, if you see footfalls when the initial box office or the opening happens, if the music of the film does well, you do see good numbers in terms of opening, right? So I think music is of strategic importance, and 15 to 20% of your cost rather is coming from the music cost in terms of the production cost and talent cost, everything put together. So because of this, there is a shift which is happening wherein music labels and production houses are both getting aligned on a strategic basis.
And what about talent management, Prahlad? It's turning out to be a big deal as well. You talk about Dharma, they've acquired their talent JV and they're rebranding it as Dharma Collab Artist Agency. That move towards owning talent relationships and influencer IP, endorsements, the digital first creators, the brand collaborations. How big a part do you think that's going to be about this entire move towards corporatization of Bollywood?
Potentially, it's huge. But the problem here with the industry versus the corporation is that corporates don't have a single creative bone in their body. The production houses have the creative instincts to be able to judge what might work, what might not work. But it's also a fluke. Okay, so they are not also completely bulletproof or foolproof. The problem with the industry is that they're completely indisciplined. So they don't bring in films in the budgets that they're supposed to at the time that they initiate them. They initiate a film for 50 crores with a storyline and a star cast which is recoverable. And the film goes into 150 crores. How the hell is it going to be recoverable after that? So there's complete lack of answerability and discipline as far as the industry is concerned. There's complete lack of creative intuition as far as corporates are concerned. So hopefully corporates will bring some discipline into the whole business and make it into a contractual business so people can't just play ducks and drakes with dates.
Of looking at it, and Shubhashish Sarkar, maybe you can weigh in on this, because when you talk about corporatization, you're talking about ease of finance. And one can say that once you have that, then it sparks creativity. Or sometimes then commercial compulsions come into play, and that would essentially mean that creativity gets squeezed. So when you're talking about instinct over here, that Prahlad is alluding to, what happens with corporate capital entering Bollywood? What does the process of filmmaking, what kind of changes does it go through?
The sensible corporate capital will always enter this industry with the buy-in of the creative leaders. If this business, unlike many other business, cannot be driven only through capital infusion systems and processes, I completely agree with Prahlad that ultimately it ends up with a gut call of the creator. You build in systems, you build in process, you build in budgetary disciplines, which by and large, honestly, I slightly disagree with Prahlad that last 25, 30 years, I think the industry has moved a lot towards from the time when I have seen to now. But by and large, the industry works towards the setups, goals, and we have all learned these practices. We have learned these practices from the platforms, from the corporatization, from the systems processes. All the global studios at one point of time were in India between Fox, Disney, Universal, Sony, all of them. So there's a lot we have also learned in the last 25, 30 years. But this business can never be, the capital can never replace the creativity. There has to be a balance. While there has to be a discipline of that creativity, that it does not cost, that the creativity also should not be completely uncharted journey, that there is no boundaries or no parameters.
Yes.
At the same point of time, you can't replace creativity with the capital, because this is the peculiarity of the industry. Your leader has to be a creative leader, supported by the best capital, best resources, and best scalability opportunity.
What about building that distribution network? We're talking about creativity, we're talking about music rights, but the distribution part of it, because we're trying to achieve global scale. Karan, what's your take? Because I was seeing that Dharma, their stated goal after the Poonawalla investment includes building this independent distribution network. So there is a lot of value in that, which is a direct challenge to that old studio exhibitor kind of model that we had. That dependency between studio and exhibitor, that perhaps is going out of the window. What replaces it now with corporate interest in Bollywood?
So there have been studios in the past who have dealt directly with the exhibitors rather than dealing with distributors or some kind of agencies which actually attract every amount of commissions. That is a strategic change which is there. I think another thing to watch out is the Netflix Warner deal. How will that pan out? Because there could be windows actually coming down in terms of the films from going from theatrical to the OTT platforms, which is currently about 8 to 12 weeks today for Hindi and English films put together. There could be certain amount of disruption there. Another important point is that 80 to 90% of box office in Hindi today is dominated by large budget films, right? As I said earlier, there are 12 to 13 films which dominate the box office, and this dominance is only increasing in the post-COVID era. So this gives ample amount of runway or leeway for the companies to invest into high budget franchise films, because the audience today has become very demanding in terms of what they want to actually watch in cinemas. They are not just going and watching any particular film in cinemas the way they used to earlier. There's a behavior shift over here. And last but not the least, I think many of these companies, for example, Universal Music, or for example, in Saregama for that matter, you will see a lot of shift happening in terms of the way these films are distributed globally because of ample amount of capital. Because most of these films do require capital to promote the film. So first step is to kind of create the nature of content which doesn't appeal to the Indian audience, but also globally. The audience has to be, this film has to be accepted globally by the audience. And the second is distribution costs, doing proper marketing, promotions, everything put together, which will actually happen because of the deep pockets of these larger conglomerates and studios.
They have deep pockets, there's no taking away from that. So Prahlad, 5 years from now, where do you think power centers in Bollywood are going to be? Are they still going to be with filmmakers? Because you still have the stars holding some of those production houses. I don't know if you're going to see a quick shift over there, but 5 years from now, will it still sit with them, or are films going to be decided in boardrooms and based on balance sheets?
If it's so, if the films are going to be decided in boardrooms, the whole pack of cards is going to collapse. And we'll be back to square one, like we were. I mean, we started the corporatization of Hindi movies 5 years ago, and it failed miserably. I mean, the corporate people didn't have a single bone in their body which understood what was good cinema, what was bad cinema. They just understood a formula. And formulas are not working anymore. Audiences are not consuming formulas. They are consuming original content. And that also of an international scale, because they've been exposed by OTT to so much international cinema that the tastes have become better. They're no longer into the song and dance and running around trees and everything piled into one.
Yes.
And illogical kind of thing. Down to have a strong storyline. Without strong storylines, there is no film. So the point is that I'm very skeptical about this corporatization business, because I don't know where the line will be drawn. Who will have creative control?
So the very fact that you're saying that OTT has so much of a say and so much of power to be able to decide the course that Bollywood takes in the future,
yes.
And we're talking about an important deal that Netflix has probably got in its hands. We'll have to keep tracking what happens with their entire bid for Warner Discovery, and that perhaps is going to change the game, as it were. So if you zoom out that much more, but what's clear from this is that Bollywood is not abandoning creativity. It is rewriting the business of creativity. So corporate capital is moving in. It is happening. The industry is shifting towards IP, and there is scale and profitability and global reach that we can expect. But the big question is no longer whether money is going to shape movies, but how much control it's going to have over the stories that are told. My thanks to our guests for joining us, Shubhashri Sarkar, Karan Taurani, Prahlad Kakkar. This is going to be an ongoing discussion, and we'll keep circling in for more of these. But thanks very much for your insights tonight. And that's about all we could pack into this edition of The Big Question. The questions keep rising, and we try and find you answers. But for the moment, from me, Vikram Oza, and the entire team, good evening.